that, esteemed colleagues, is why I propose we reject the Terran application to join the Galactic Academic Alliance. Professor Zilks concluded, his tentacles waving dismissively. The holographic projection of Earth slowly rotated above the conference table, surrounded by the assorted aliens of the admissions committee. A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. Well, more like a cacophony, given the diverse array of vocal apparatuses present. From the avian trills of the Evraxians to the resonant hums of the gaseous nebulons, it was clear that the sentiment was near unanimous. Near, but not quite. "Oh, come on!" The exasperated voice cut through the din, silencing the chamber. All eyes and various other sensory organs swiveled to face the speaker. "Dr. Lerna!" The Centaurian representative stood up, her iridescent scales shimmering with indignation. Are we seriously going to dismiss an entire species based on... what? The fact that they don't have backup neural networks, that their circulatory system is, and I quote, alarmingly simplistic. Professor Zix's eye stalk swiveled towards her, blinking in rapid succession. The Zygonian equivalent of an eye roll. "Dr. Lerna, surely you can't be advocating for the inclusion of a species so fragile. Have you seen their medical records? A simple impact to the cranium can render them unconscious. Their skeletal structure is rigid and prone to fractures. And don't even get me started on their utterly exposed vital organs." The room erupted in laughter, or at least what passed for laughter in a gathering of beings from across the galaxy. Some chortled, others vibrated, and a few in the back seemed to be inflating and deflating rapidly. Larna waited for the mirth to subside, her tendrils twitching with barely contained frustration. Ah, yes, because academic prowess is directly proportional to the number of backup organs one possesses. "I must have missed that memo. Your sarcasm is noted," Dr. Six retorted, his color shifting to a deeper shade of purple. "But facts are facts. The humans are simply too breakable for the rigors of galactic academia." "Breakable?" Lerna scoffed. "Have any of you actually met a human? Or are we basing all our judgments on anatomical scans and outdated stereotypes?" The silence that followed was as telling as any verbal response. "That's what I thought," Lerna continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "Well, esteemed colleagues, allow me to enlighten you. I've had the pleasure of working with humans during my research sabbatical on Earth, and let me tell you, they are anything but unbreakable." She tapped a command into her datapad and the holographic display shifted. The image of Earth was replaced by a montage of human activities. Extreme sports, deep-sea diving, spacewalks, and these fragile beings, Leona explained, her voice tinged with admiration, routinely throw themselves off cliffs for fun. They dive into the crushing depths of their oceans. They launch themselves into the void of space in vessels that, by our standards, might as well be made of papier-mâché and hope. The committee members watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the images played out before them. But that's just reckless behavior," Silk sputtered. "Surely their scientific community doesn't engage in such madness." Lerna's scales rippled in what her colleagues recognized as her species' equivalent of a smirk. "Oh, my dear Zilks, you have no idea." With another tap, the display changed again. This time, it showed various human scientists in action. "Marie Curie," Lerna began, pointing to an image of a woman working with glowing materials. She handled radioactive elements with her bare hands, eventually dying from the exposure, but not before revolutionizing our understanding of radioactivity. The image shifted to a man in a diving suit, William Beebe. He descended into the ocean depths in a hollow metal sphere barely big enough to contain him. Why? To study deep-sea life, of course. Another tap. Another image. This time, a man injecting himself with a syringe. Barry Marshall. Frustrated that no one believed his theory about the cause of stomach ulcers, he drank a broth containing the bacteria he believed responsible. He gave himself gastritis to prove a point, and won a Nobel Prize for it. The committee was silent now, their earlier mirth replaced by a mix of disbelief and grudging. "And let's not forget their space program," Lerna continued, warming to her topic. When their first attempts at reaching orbit ended in explosions? Did they give up? No, they strapped more humans to more rockets and kept trying. They went from their first powered flight to walking on their moon in just 66 years. 66 years. Most species take that long just to agree on the design of the spacecraft. She paused, looking around the room. Still think they're too breakable? Professor Zilks is purple hue now, tinged with a hint of embarrassed pink, cleared his throat. Why, your examples are impressive, Dr. Lerner. They still don't address the fundamental issue. Humans lack the physical resilience that we've come to expect from member species. How can they hope to contribute meaningfully to galactic academia when a simple lab accident could prove fatal? Lorna's scales rippled in what her colleagues had come to recognize as barely contained laughter. Oh, Zilks, you're missing the point entirely. It's precisely because of their physical vulnerability that humans have become unbreakable in spirit. She tapped her datapad once more, and the holographic display shifted to show a variety of human inventions and innovations. Look at this, she said, gesturing to the display. Artificial limbs that respond to neural impulses, organs grown in labs, nanobots that can repair cellular damage, exoskeletons that amplify strength. Humans don't just accept their limitations, they systematically obliterate them. The committee members leaned in. Their curiosity piqued, despite their earlier dismissiveness. But surely, a Nebulan representative chimed in, his gaseous form swirling with interest. These advancements are recent, a product of their contact with more advanced civilizations. Lyrna's scales flashed in a pattern that indicated amusement. Oh, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But no. Most of these innovations predate their first contact with extraterrestrial life. In fact, many of our member species have adopted human medical technologies since establishing relations with Earth. She paused, letting that sink in. And it's not just in medicine. Their problem-solving skills are, well, frankly, they're insane. In the best, another tap, and the display showed a series of human artifacts. Everything from simple tools to complex machines. Humans have this saying, Lena continued. Necessity is the mother of invention. But for them, it's more than a saying. It's a way of life. They see a problem and instead of avoiding it or working around it, they attack it head-on. Often literally. The image shifted to show a human wearing what looked like a suit made of springs and cushions. This is an early airbag suit for motorcyclists. The human wearing it would deliberately crash at high speeds to test its effectiveness. Can you imagine? Voluntarily subjecting yourself to potentially fatal impacts over and over just to develop a safety device. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the committee. But it's not just their willingness to take risks that makes them remarkable, Lerna pressed on. It's their ability to learn from failure. Every setback, every disaster becomes a lesson, a stepping stone to something greater. She brought up an image of a massive ship. It's a Titanic. A maritime disaster that claimed over 1,500 lives. A tragedy, yes, but it led to major reforms in maritime safety. Lifeboat requirements, ice patrols, 24-hour radio watches. Humans took one of their greatest failures and used it to make sea travel safer for everyone. The display shifted again, this time showing the charred remains of a space shuttle. Challenger disaster, a spacecraft that exploded shortly after launch, killing all aboard. A devastating blow to their space program. But did they give up? No. They investigated, they learned, they improved, and they kept reaching for the stars. Lerna paused, looking around the room. The earlier dismissiveness was gone, replaced by thoughtful consideration. Don't you see? She continued, her voice soft but intense. It's not in spite of their fragility that humans have achieved so much. It's because of it. Their vulnerability drives them to innovate, to push boundaries, to find solutions where we see only obstacles. She turned to face Professor Zilks directly. You say they're too breakable for galactic academia. I say they're exactly what we need. Their unique perspective, their relentless drive, their ability to think outside the box. These are the qualities that will push our understanding of the universe forward. Zix's eye stalks drooped slightly, a sign of grudging acceptance. You make a compelling case, Dr. Lerner. But surely you must admit integrating humans into our academic institutions would present challenges, their physical limitations, opportunities for growth. Lerner interrupted. Think about it. How many of our labs, our research facilities, our methodologies are designed with multiple redundancies, fail-safes, and safeguards? We've become complacent, relying on our natural resilience rather than pushing the boundaries of safety and efficiency. She gestured expansively. Imagine the advancements we could make if we had to consider human fragility in our designs. Our labs would become safer, more efficient. Our research methodologies more precise. We wouldn't just be accommodating humans. We'd be elevating our entire approach to science. The room buzzed with discussion. Lerner could see the tide turning, skepticism giving way to curiosity and even excitement. And let's not forget, she added, unable to resist a final jab, these breakable humans have already made significant contributions to fields we thought we had mastered. Their unique neurological structure has led to breakthroughs in cognitive science. Their art and literature have introduced concepts that have revolutionized our understanding of consciousness and perception. She pulled up one final image. A human hand reaching out to an alien one. By rejecting humans, we're not protecting our academic standards. We're limiting our own potential for growth and discovery. The room fell silent as the committee members digested this. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Professor Zix spoke. Dr. Lerner, he began, his tone measured, you've given us much to consider. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgment. Lerner's scales rippled with barely contained triumph. I move, Zix continued, that we table the decision on the Terran application pending further investigation and personal interaction with human academic. The motion was quickly seconded and passed almost unanimously. As the committee began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the prospect of working with humans, Lerner allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. She had opened the door for humanity to join the galactic academic community, and she had a feeling that the galaxy would never be the same. As she gathered her things, a thought struck her, and she chuckled softly to herself. Unbreakable indeed, she murmured. Just wait until they discover human grad students living off nothing but caffeine and sheer determination. That'll really blow their minds. With that, she left the chamber, already planning her next move. The humans were coming to Galactic Academia, and she couldn't wait to see what they would break next. Be it scientific barriers, academic norms, or just the general sense of complacency that had settled over the galactic community. One thing was certain. Things were about to get very interesting indeed. 6 standard galactic months later, the halls of the Galactic Academia's central hub were abuzz with excitement. The first wave of human academics had arrived, and to say they were making an impression would be an understatement of cosmic proportions. Dr. Lerner found herself constantly fielding questions from her alien colleagues, each more bewildered than the last. Dr. Lerner! The flustered Avraxian professor squawked, nearly dropping his stack of data pads, the human in the quantum mechanics department. She's been awake for 3 full rotations. Is this normal? Should we call for medical assistance? Lerner's scales rippled with amusement. You must be talking about Dr. Chen. Don't worry, she's just pulling an all-nighter, or 3 in this case. It's a common human practice during intense research phases. Just make sure there's a steady supply of coffee and she'll be fine. The Avraxian blinked all 4 of his eyes in rapid succession. Coffee? You mean that bitter caffeinated beverage they consume in alarming quantities? We thought it was some kind of ritual fuel. Well, Lerner chuckled. You're not entirely wrong about the fuel part. As the Avraxian hurried off, muttering about updating the lab's nutritional synthesizers, Lerner found herself face-to-face with Professor Zix. Dr. Lerner, he began, his tentacles twitching nervously. I must admit, when you advocated for the humans' inclusion, I had my doubts. But now, he paused, his eye stalks swiveling to take in the bustling activity around them. Now, I'm beginning to see what you meant about their unique approach to problem-solving. Lerner raised an eyebrow ridge. Oh, do tell. Zilix's color shifted to a mix of awe and mild concern. Well, there's the astrophysics team. They've proposed a method of studying black holes that involves, and I quote, surfing the event horizon. When I pointed out the dangers, they just laughed and said something about hanging 10 on the cosmic waves. Liorna couldn't help but laugh. Ah, yes, the human propensity for turning deadly serious scientific endeavors into extreme sports. I should have warned you about that. And then there's the xenobiology department, Zix continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. They've started a betting pool on who can safely sample the most toxic alien flora. They call it poison roulette. Oh dear, Luna sighed, though she couldn't quite hide her amusement. I'll have a word with them about proper lab safety protocols, though I must admit their enthusiasm for hands-on research is refreshing. Zix nodded, then leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, I may have placed a small wager on Dr. Harrison. His tolerance for neurotoxins is quite impressive. Lerna's scales flashed in surprise. Professor Zilks, I never took you for a gambler. Yes, well, Zix replied, his color deepening to a flustered purple. These humans seem to have a way of bringing out one's adventurous side. As if on cue, a loud explosion echoed from a nearby lab, followed by excited whoops and cheers. Speaking of adventure, Lerna sighed, I'd better go check on that. Probably the quantum tunneling experiment. Again, as she hurried off, Zilks called after her, Dr. Lerna. One last thing. The humans in the linguistics department, is it true they're attempting to communicate with the void beings of the Andromeda galaxy by, what did they call it, screaming into the cosmic abyss? Lerna paused, turning back with a grin. Oh, that. Yes, it's their latest project. They've theorized that the void beings might respond to certain frequencies of human vocalizations. Something about the unique harmonics of a human scream resonating with the fundamental frequencies of the universe. Zilx's eye stalks drooped in disbelief. But the void beings have been silent for millennia. Countless civilizations have tried to establish contact. True, Lorna nodded, but none of them tried screaming, did they? And you have to admit, if anything's going to wake up an ancient, slumbering race of cosmic entities, it's probably going to be a human yelling, "Hey, you guys want to chat?" Zilx's tentacles waved in a gesture of bemused surrender. I suppose you have a point, though I shudder to think what might happen if they actually succeed. That's the spirit, Professor, Lena laughed. Now you're thinking like a human, always pushing boundaries, even if those boundaries might push back. As she turned to leave, another thought struck her. Oh, and Zilx, you might want to update the cafeteria menu. I overheard some of the human researchers talking about missing something called pizza. Apparently, it's crucial for late-night breakthroughs. With that, she hurried off towards the source of the explosion, leaving a thoroughly bewildered but oddly excited Zilx in her wake. One standard galactic year later, the annual Galactic Academic Conference was in full swing and the main auditorium was packed to capacity. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and states of matter jostled for position, their attention focused on the stage where a human professor was about to present his team's findings. Dr. Yerna sat in the front row, her scales shimmering with anticipation. Next to her, Professor Zix's eye stalks were fully extended, not wanting to miss a moment of the presentation. As the human took the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. He cleared his throat and began, "Distinguished colleagues, today I'm excited to share with you our groundbreaking work on transdimensional communication. But before I do, I'd like to thank the Galactic Academic Alliance for taking a chance on us unbreakable humans." A ripple of laughter ran through the audience. Now, I know some of you were skeptical about our methods. Yes, we did technically create a micro black hole in our lab. And yes, 3 of our research assistants did get temporarily phase-shifted into another dimension. But look on the bright side. We can now order takeout from parallel universes. More laughter mixed with some concerned murmurs from the more conservative members of the audience. But in all seriousness, the professor continued, "This discovery has the potential to revolutionize not just communication, but our very understanding of the multiverse. And it all started because we asked a simple question. What if we could break the barriers between dimensions?" As the presentation continued, detailing the mind-bending experiments and paradigm-shifting results, Dr. Lerna leaned over to Professor Zilx. "So," she whispered, her scales rippling with amusement. Still think they're too breakable for Galactic. Zix's eye stalks swiveled towards her, and she could have sworn she saw a twinkle in them. "My dear Dr. Lirna," he replied, his voice a mix of exasperation and admiration, "I'm beginning to think that nothing in this universe, or any other, is truly unbreakable, except perhaps the human spirit." As if on cue, alarms began to blare, and the human professor's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't panic, everyone! This is just a routine interdimensional breach. We've got it under control, mostly." Lirna and Zilks exchanged a look. Yes, things had certainly gotten interesting, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Epilogue! 5 standard galactic years later, the Galactic Academic Alliance had never been the same since the inclusion of humans. The annual conference, once a state affair of carefully prepared presentations and polite academic discourse, had transformed into something akin to a scientific carnival. This year's event was being held on Earth, a decision that had initially caused no small amount of concern among the non-human attendees. But as alien academics of all species mingled with their human counterparts in the bustling conference center, those concerns seemed like a distant memory. Dr. Lirna, now the head of the Interspecies Collaboration Committee, stood on a balcony overlooking the main exhibition hall. The scene below was one of organized chaos that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. In one corner, a team of Zygonian biologists were engaged in an intense debate with human geneticists over the ethical implications of splicing tardigrade DNA into other species. The humans' argument that being a little more indestructible never hurt anyone was met with equal parts horror and fascination. Nearby, a group of Nebulan physicists floated excitedly around a human engineer who was demonstrating a prototype cloud computer, a quantum computing system designed to interface directly with gaseous life forms. The Nebulan's enthusiastic expansions and contraction suggested they were more than a little and in the center of it all, a mixed team of human and alien linguists were preparing for another attempt at communicating with the void beings. They had set up what looked like a cross between a rock concert stage and a radio telescope, complete with amplifiers that would make any heavy metal band jealous. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" A familiar voice broke Lirna from her reverie. She turned to see Professor Zilks joining her at the balcony. "Professor!" Lirna greeted him warmly. "Or should I say, esteemed chair of the admissions committee, I heard about your promotion. Congratulations." Zix's tentacles waved in a gesture of modest acknowledgement. "Thank you, Dr. Lirna, though I must say the job has become considerably more exciting since we started accepting human applicants." Lirna laughed. "Oh, I can imagine. Any particularly memorable applications this year?" Zix's eye stalks swiveled in what Lirna had come to recognize as the Zygonian equivalent of an eye roll. "Where do I begin? There's the quantum physicist who wants to tickle the strings of string theory. Literally, she's developed some sort of vibrating probe that she claims can interact with the fundamental fabric of the universe." "Sounds stimulating," Lirna quipped. "Indeed," Zix continued, either missing or choosing to ignore the pun. "Then there's the marine biologist who's proposing to psychoanalyze giant squid. Something about understanding the cosmic horrors of the deep sea mind. Well, you have to admire their creativity," Lirna mused. "Any front-runners?" Zix's color shifted to a thoughtful blue. "Actually, yes. There's a young human from a place called Minnesota's who's developed a fascinating theory about using wormholes for waste disposal. She calls it cosmic composting. The potential applications for solving galactic-scale pollution are intriguing, turning the fundamental laws of physics into a recycling system." Lirna chuckled. "Now that's human ingenuity for you." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden crescendo of excitement from below. The Void Being communication team was powering up their equipment, preparing for another attempt at cosmic contact. As the first notes of what sounded suspiciously like a heavy metal cover of Mozart's Symphony No. 41 began to reverberate through the hall, accompanied by the enthusiastic screams of the human linguists. Lirna and Zilks shared a look of amused resignation. "You know," Zilks mused, his voice barely audible over the growing cacophony, When you first advocated for including humans in the Alliance, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. And now? Luna asked, her scales shimmering with curiosity. Zoox's eye stalks curved, and what Lyrna had learned was a Zygonian smile. Now I think it might have been the best decision we ever made. They may be breakable in body, but their spirits, their ideas. He trailed off as a particularly enthusiastic power chord shook the building. Below, alien academics were either covering their auditory organs in shock or bobbing along to the rhythm. Sometimes both at once. Their volume? Luna suggested Riley. Unbreakable, Zoox finished. Utterly, wonderfully unbreakable. As if in response, a deep, resonant tone suddenly cut through the music. The void beings, silent for millennia, were answering. Lyrna and Zoox stared at each other in shock for a moment before bursting into laughter. It was official. The humans had broken the universe, and somehow, improbably, they had made it better in the process. As the conference descended into joyous chaos, Lyrna couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had been right about the human. They were exactly what the galaxy needed. A reminder that the greatest discoveries often come not from careful planning and cautious experiments, but from the willingness to take risks, to think the unthinkable, and to remain unbroken in the face of the impossible. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Lyrna thought as she watched humans and aliens alike celebrate their shared breakthrough, was precisely the point.